今天我想跟大家分享一些即使没有环境也可以让你学到非常地道、非常纯正的美语表达的一些工具书。总共有3大类，第一大类是一些对话教材，一些 conversational materials。第二大类是一些常见的 phrases. These could be just regular phrases that you haven't seen in textbooks or on TV all that much. Or these could be slang, idioms, just like irregular ways of saying things. Or they could just be a conversational starter. The second type of books are more scenario based as opposed to the first type of conversational books. It's more like conversation based. There's 2 people or more involved. So that's that. And then the third category is just purely idioms, purely irregular language. So I feel like in any given situation, in any given conversation, there's all these elements involved. Whereas before, you were probably only learning from one source of input, one source of actual things to say. Let's say you're only learning American TV shows. Sometimes the TV shows could be a bit too hard. Like if you're watching Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, it's like very fantasy, sci-fi based. You don't learn a lot of like actual conversational things. And then second of all, some people like to read a lot. They like to listen to TED Talks, a lot of like jargony or terminology centric stuff. That's also kind of deviated from actual conversations. So I think learning all these elements of what could go into a conversation covers all the grounds. That being said, the first category we have conversational textbooks. This one I recently got. It's called Speak English Like an American. And I like that it's kind of short and sweet. There's a title, there's a name for the situation. Like this one is Ted Goes Out for the Evening. Basically, it's just like hanging out, saying bye, you know. And then behind every conversation, there's all the idioms or phrases involved. So it can extrapolate even more valuable stuff from that short conversation. But like I said in my previous video, you can't just rely on any textbook. You have to use it with a dictionary so that when you run into a word that you've seen elsewhere before, you can study it and you can make your own sentences out of it. Sometimes it might not be accurate what they said on the textbook. And then similarly, we have one more conversational textbook. Actually, 2 more, but yeah, English the American Way. This one is a little old, both the book that I got and also this edition. It came out like years ago. And although it has a lot of themes like living in America, what situations you might run into, it's a great like ESL textbook. Actually, a lot of ESL schools that I know use this textbook because it covers conversations and also like reading materials. But what I don't like about it is that under the vocab list, it doesn't tell you what part of speech this is. It doesn't say, oh, this is a noun, this is a verb. It also doesn't tell you how common these words are. Like sometimes they'll talk about drop by, which is very common. But then again, it'll be like hatchback. Like you don't need to learn that word, okay? That's too specific. Backstroke. That is also too specific. Backstroke. And I don't like how I explained it either. It's like backstroke. You guessed it. A swinging move done on your back. Okay, first of all, when you're a beginner, you can't even use a purely English definition to understand some of these complicated words. But the fact that this textbook doesn't have any of that and it doesn't tell you what this vocab is good for, then it kind of defeats the purpose. That being said, I think it's a great reading material. I think it's a great introduction into America. If you've never lived here, if you've never watched any American TV shows, it can be a little overwhelming. So it talks about like things like going to the DMV or like going to a barbecue cookout, which I'm going to, ironically. And then we have, once again, English conversation. I really like this book. I like the size. I like that it's a workbook and like you learn a little, you do a little exercise and the fonts are big. That's pretty much it. And I checked out some of the conversations. I've run into similar situations like the ones in the textbook and the expressions are very authentic. If it's one thing I could do to make it better is to really make sure I prioritize the words. Like if I were to have a textbook, which that gives me an idea. I should have a textbook. But in the vocab study session, I will tell students, okay, this word is within the most common 500 range. So obviously it's very, very important that you learn these words first. And then this other word is not as common. It's more like real life image-centric words that you can learn later on, right? So that students have a way of prioritizing certain things over others. Because if you're overwhelming them with so much information, they don't know where to start. Category number 2 is phrase books. So phrase books, unlike conversational textbooks, don't have a conversation. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory, but I feel like just pointing it out. It's based on scenarios, what one person would say in this scenario. We have things like wishing someone well. You could say, have a nice day, all the best, take care now. You know, all the phrases that you would hear in textbooks, in conversations, in real life, or on TV. It's just like previously you never had a place of like seeing all the possible responses in one place, and you haven't necessarily grouped them into different scenarios. So I feel like this would be great if you have an emergency big meeting or a promotion or an interview, like occasions with big stakes behind them. Then you can study cram the night before. So I've got one that looks like this, Perfect Phrases for ESL Conversation Skills. I've talked about this book before, so. And then 2, we have Conversational American English. It's not exposed properly. It's like reflecting all the light, but whatever. I'll put a B-roll here. And then one last book, Common American Phrases in Everyday Context. The only difference between this and the 2 previous books is that this is more like a dictionary. It's alphabetized. Use it as a dictionary. Whenever you run into a phrase that you can't really understand, then look it up in this book or Google it. So yeah, I don't use this one too much, but the other ones, I use them. Before we move on to the 3rd category, I just want to put out a shameless plug, although not shameless. I believe in the value of my books. But anyway, if you want to learn phrases based on scenarios, but you don't want to only read English, you want to have some Chinese translations, also you don't want to spend too much money, then I have the perfect pick for you. I have a phrase book called Ella 的口语笔记, which is essentially the same idea. I group phrases into different scenarios so that you can anticipate what to say. You can figure out like different responses based on how formal or informal, how funny you want to be. And then obviously I include Chinese translations. And then on top of like scenario-based phrase books, I also have phrases based on common words. Phrases with the word go in it. A lot of times it could mean so many different things. I think, yeah, that would be great for you. I'm really bad at this. Yeah. Okay, you get the gist. You get the gist.
I'll say it again.
Okay. I'm glad that you're here.
What are you trying to tell me?
I'm telling you to buy my book, bitch.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna keep that. I like the little banter that we have. I have my assistant with me today. That's why I'm like talking off camera. I'll show you a picture of her. She's really beautiful.
Thank you.
She'll make a cameo at some point. You guys, just get these idiom workbooks. Well, this is more like an idiom dictionary. It's alphabetized. Again, I don't really like alphabetized books just because I'm not going to go through like letter A through Z alphabetically, chronologically. But it does come into play when you want to look something up really fast.